My jelly beans are still tucked to my tooth, but just have to roll with it.
Where am I looking, by the way?
Looking good.
Thank you.
How am I looking?
Where?
Where am I looking?
Oh, sorry.
Just at each other.
At each other.
You definitely
Not there.
need to include that as one of the outtakes.
No. Okay, so welcome to Roadmap Autotraders UK's Product Tech Podcast. I had to remember, it's been a long day. Today we're branching out, so we've done these a few times where we branch out of the world of products and tech and go into a deeper dive into Autotrader's employee culture. And this time around we're chatting to the Ethnicity network, and I've got three close colleagues on the couch. All actually I think first time on the couch. I don't think we've done one of these before. So we've got hello Farooq.
How are you? You okay?
I'm good, thank you. And we've got Farzana. Am I allowed to use your nickname on this one?
You are,
Fuzz?
Peter.
Okay,
I was just going to say you can
yes,
call
I
me
know. Only because when I wrote your name down, I wrote Farzana, Fuzz. So,
Fuzz is fine.
Yeah, great. And last but not least, we've got John.
Hello.
So before we kick off, I mean, obviously I've given people your full names. It'd be great for you to just give a quick intro into who you are, your role within Autotrader, and also within the network. I'm going to start with you, John. So
Yeah, John, so head of finance systems and business insight. So working in the finance community. Been with Autotrader now for coming up to 9 years.
I can remember when you first started, John.
Yeah.
A wee
I can remember.
Working on those Tagetic upgrades. I remember.
Yeah, we might
I
do
do
one
remember.
on finance systems.
Exactly.
Some nightmares behind those, but no, all good. No, I think for me, been part of the network now for probably coming to 3 years now.
Yeah.
I'm privileged to be the co-lead of the network today, with Sam Happy, but Sam couldn't join us today.
Okay. And over to you, Farzana.
Well, it's Fuzz.
It is Fuzz.
I'm Fuzz for short, and I've been with Autotrader for 13 years. Actually, it was my work anniversary on the 21st of May.
Was
Happy
it?
anniversary.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Mine's
much.
coming up soon as well.
13 years,
Yeah.
unlucky for some. I am Director of Commercial Finance, so I've worked in finance since I've started actually and done a number of different roles, but most recent role is Director of Commercial Finance. Have an awesome team, and I'm on the ALT as well, so yeah, that's me.
Cool. And over to you, Farooq.
Last but not least, eh?
Yeah, I know, but I can't, because we're going to keep doing that.
We
Last
keep
but
going
not
round
least,
last but not
yeah.
least. So I'm Farooq. I've been at Autotrader for 16 years now.
Wow.
Bloody hell.
Done various roles across the business. I'm operations director. We have an operations team of about 160 people. So that's a large group of people to be responsible for, but they're all fantastic, absolutely fantastic. In terms of the network, I've sort of been close to the network from inception, not always playing a lead role, but massively interested in what we're doing. And have often sort of taken a bit of a consultative role in terms of stepping in, guiding where we're going with certain initiatives and stuff. So being close throughout. Currently with Farzana, I'm network sponsor, and it's fantastic. It's good.
Yeah, cool. So, I mean, you touched on the network being around for a while, so I thought it'd be great just to introduce from your perspective as a sponsor and co-lead, like what the network's about, like the purpose of the network, like how long's it been around, how big is the network community, because obviously you've got the leads, and then you've got the facilitators, and then you've got people that just participate and engage, just to give like people that might not be part of Autotrader or people that are in Autotrader a bit more interested in the Ethnicity network. So I don't know who wants to start with some of the history.
Yeah. I've done a bit of research on this.
Have you?
Yeah.
I'm glad you have, because I was thinking, I was having a bit of a scan before. I was thinking, it's all right, I'll leave that to the crew.
No, I mean, the network's formally named as BAME.
Yeah.
And it actually started in September 2017.
Wow. So what's that, is that 8 years ago now?
8 years ago.
now.
Heck.
8 years ago now. But we changed to Ethnicity in June 2023.
Right.
Currently, as it stands, on our channel on Slack,
Yeah.
we have 545 members.
So that's what, so percentage wise, that's like a good over a third of the organisation, isn't it? Yet?
It is. So it's good. It's good reach.
Yeah.
Good reach. Well, we could do more.
Yeah, do you like my maths there? Can I join finance?
I think you're qualified to join finance there.
You've got a master's degree, haven't
Oh,
you?
let's not go there.
Yeah.
But,
So 2017, 500 plus members. And how big's the facilitation crew?
So facilitator wise, we're on 7
Yeah.
as of this week. We've had a new facilitator join.
Awesome.
And in terms of work that we're trying to do, we plan out the year. We work with our other networks and work with our sponsors just to understand what do we want to do and try and achieve in terms of our commitments.
Yeah.
And also what the goals are to try and get there.
Yeah.
I mean, we're touching on commitments, and each 12 months, what we do is present back a fresh set of commitments. But there's some common themes, I think, each year. I think one of the core things to call out is our sort of drive to sort of deliver some equity across the business.
Yeah.
So trying to get a bit of a level playing field for people, building up skills, tools, knowledge to allow people to progress in their careers. So that's a huge thing that we're driving.
And has that been something that's been like a perennial thing within the network since it started, or is that something more recent?
I think it's an ongoing thing, and
Yeah.
I think actually it applies to all of the networks. So where you're talking about diverse groups of people, that equity thing of almost like when you're starting a race, but there's certain groups of people that are 10 meters behind
Yeah.
at the start point, how do you bring them up so you've got a level of equity, so it feels more even across the business. So that applies across the board. And I think the second thing for me is equality of opportunity. We've worked really, really well across the people team, across learning and development, around how we recruit people, and that whole life cycle of people while they're at Autotrader, delivering those opportunities for them for promotions, moving jobs, moving sideways, etc. We've delivered really, really well with the people team. So that's great.
And that is in recognition of that there were those aspects of equality of opportunity that weren't there for the communities within the network. And it's like working, like as Farooq said, working really hard with our L&D teams, our people team, our leadership teams, just to understand that there is an issue there, but actually, as Autotrader, how do we make sure that there is that equality, that aspect of trying to bring equity into opportunities for people.
And if we're looking at that, if that's something we've been looking at since the inception of the network 8 years ago, are there specific like year-on-year specific commitments? So what if we're looking at the pack today of the things for 2025 and beyond? What are the kind of things on this year?
There's been the 3 pillars, and those 3 pillars have always existed for the network, whether it was BAME, whether it was the Ethnicity network. And they were either inform and educate, so that is about raising the awareness around the societal or workplace challenges that people of colour or ethnic diversity do face, and bringing that to life, whether that is the awareness campaigns that we would facilitate, and such as Black History Month or Race Equality Week, and it's just, I think it's that aspect about raising awareness, the inform and educate people. Like, not everybody has lived the experiences of people in the network.
Yeah.
So I think it's about just making that piece about I say educate, but that informing, the curiosity piece of understanding what it means to be a person of colour, and that there are challenges that people do face, and whether that's job opportunities we spoke about before, or whether that's just about being out in society and community. That there
that's something I know me and you, Fuzz, we've chatted about this a few times, haven't we? In terms of those specifics, and especially around the lived experiences. And what if I was joining Autotrader today and I wanted to become part of the Ethnicity Network, what things would I expect to see over the next 12 months, whether it's event wise or like what is the calendar or the things we're trying to
that's one of the
specifically
things to touch
achieve?
on, isn't it? That we talk about equity, equality. The third big pillar there is the celebratory side of stuff.
Yeah,
that actually, when you're at Autotrader, based on your heritage, religion, background, culture, we really want you to feel part of the Autotrader business. And so actually we're massively inclusive around celebrating some of those things.
I think that's true as well. And sometimes it's not the big ticket items. It's not the stuff that's in the diary. I think for me, the network over the years has really evolved into like inspiring people to have deeper relationships, whether that's people from a common background or people from different backgrounds. Like it's really inspired as part of that sort of inform and educate, giving people a bit more of a chance to share. And sharing with the intent that someone is actually going to listen and understand. And that sounds really subtle, but is actually super powerful.
Oh,
and that's that conscious decision to change the name from BAME to Ethnicity Network because it felt that was the barrier to entry. Because if you weren't of BAME categorization, then maybe it's not a network for you.
I mean, I was gonna ask specifically around that, the question of why we changed it, because there's lots of different acronyms used, and whether there's like was that so? Sounds like there was a conscious decision there. Did you look at other particular ones?
Naming's an interesting one, isn't it? I think you've got, when you name something, you've got good intent. You name because you're trying to bring a group of people together under one banner. The challenge you've then got is automatically in that process, you've potentially excluded other people. And that was probably the principle behind making that change, because everyone has ethnicity. Whereas the BAME label was almost like, well, actually, do I join? Do I get involved? Am I part of this conversation? And actually, it might have alienated people. So ethnicity, everyone has ethnicity. We're an open group, and anyone can become part of the conversation.
It's like, it's about understanding the various ethnic groups that we do have in the business, and it's having that open network where you can come and, if you are curious to understand what it means to be part of that particular community, then there are people there are resources there which can help inform.
I think labels are super interesting, and I think the reason sometimes it's so contentious and probably controversial, or everyone's got a view, is because a lot of people that form part of the Ethnicity Network all their life, all they've ever had is a label of some sort. So to be part of a group that has got a label, like it means a lot to everybody. So they've got to resonate with that label. And I actually think the evolution of the labels has become that because people have become more educated and more aware. So I think it's just been a natural evolution. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I think it's just an evolution, and it kind of shows greater understanding. I mean, to your point about not excluding people and not making it about certain groups, and when all your life, all you've ever been is a label to some people, that it really matters to you. So getting it right, you're not going to do it on day one.
Was there any pushback of moving to being called the Ethnicity Network, or was that like a unanimous decision?
I think within the Facilitator network and the leads at the time, there was discussions in terms of why it needed to change. But I think it was all for positive reasons. But there was a question around, if you did change that, then would you then dilute the focus around the various, the awareness pieces that we're trying to do as a network, whether it's around our Black community, our Asian communities, or etc. That would it detract from that if you change the label of the network? That means that awareness piece doesn't matter. But I think we discussed it, but I think ultimately it was.
And so, sorry, when was the change? 2023, 2 years ago.
And I think it's been our responsibility to reassure the network that those things won't lose focus just because of broadening of the name. And your point about dilution, a lot of people have approached me individually to raised that concern. But we've stayed focused, and our commitments have demonstrated that, and the results have demonstrated that as well, year on year. So I think we've been okay.
Yeah. I thought it was just interesting for us. He talks about the subtlety and not necessarily being the big things in the calendar and having those discussions. So how is that? I mean, because obviously there's loads going on in the world at the moment. It seems to be even more chaotic than I can even remember it. So like, how are those discussions sort of fostered, supported? Like how? Because obviously it's a tricky world to navigate. So is that something that I know? How would you approach that from a network?
It's super hard.
Yeah.
Super hard, and I wouldn't say we always get it right. But what I would say is similar to Farooq, is the intention's always good, and the subtleties come in. Like you said, you and I have some deep conversations about like experiences, sharing different perspectives, and I have so many good conversations at Autotrader. What it does is actually builds really deep relationships that you can actually then build trust that the thing that's being done or the thing that you're talking about is all done with good intention. And you've got to start there, and you've got to start sort of building that trust, and that is a really hard thing to do. So, and tackling like big societal issues where you know that everybody is going to have a different perspective, everybody's going to have a view. And the biggest thing that you're trying to drive with this network in Autotrader is to make sure that everybody treats each other with respect. And I think having them conversations openly with people that you can trust, whether it's one-to-one or whether it's in a group discussion, does promote that sort of deep relationship and understanding. So I think that's the power of the network. Like it's almost like teasing out what the conversations are that you have to have, rather than saying, this is the conversation we have to have and Autotrader's got to fix everything, because that's not possible.
And I'll probably touch on it later, but one of the sort of the proudest achievements I feel that the network has helped to facilitate were the Race Riot chat spaces that happened last year. Where the format is safe space, we can talk to each other about how it's impacted people, or conversely, how people who hadn't impacted, they wanted to understand how it's impacted those colleagues that have felt sort of the negative aspects around the riots. And I think the number of people who got together on that conversation was just fantastic to see. That Autotrader come together as that 180 culture to talk about it frankly. People coming forward and saying, it hasn't affected me, but I know it's affected my colleagues, and I want to understand, because ultimately they're there working with me day to day. They're my friends. I want to understand, and it's seeing that. Would that happen like 5 years ago if the race riots happened 5 years ago? Probably not.
Maybe not. I think these global topics that are outside of the Autotrader ecosystem, they're big issues. So growth in extreme views globally. There's wars and conflict. There's civil unrest in the UK. You've touched on the riots. And actually, when talking about the riots, I remember 1979 race riots in Southall. I witnessed those as a kid. And you sort of fast forward to 2024, the summer of 2024, and you're going, these things are still happening. So I think for us, as Fuzz quite rightly says, we can't resolve all these issues. They're global issues. What we can do, and it's really important, is that we've got to acknowledge that they're happening. Can't sweep those things under the carpet. They are actually happening. And we've got to, secondly, understand that they have a direct impact on our people, their well-being, their emotional response to these things. So those sort of two things are really important, that we acknowledge them and we understand the impact. How do we then deal with it? For us, it's about, your point, creating a safe space at Autotrader under the title of One Autotrader, bringing people together, common values, culture, respect for one another, and dialogue, as you said. But it's super difficult, isn't it? And we've talked about this.
And I think
before.
it's the subtleties that you were talking about before. I mean, personally for me, when the whole riots was going on, there were numerous people from Autotrader that reached out to me. And it made the biggest difference. A text message, a Slack message to say, are you okay? Because people were very much aware. And I don't think they realise the impact of that acknowledgement that it has, because to John's point, 5 or 6 years ago, you wouldn't have had that knowledge. You would have been expected to turn up and show up as you do every day, but the fact that people were acknowledging and understanding the impact that it has on you, because it's two-way, because I've shared as well with them and they're willing to listen and willing to acknowledge it and make a change. That's the power of it.
Yeah.
Because once people build them relationships and you've shared and you felt like somebody's listened, I think that is moving the dial in itself.
Makes a huge difference, doesn't it? It really does.
Yeah, because I mean, like, I can obviously remember that period, because I've got some friends that live in Southport as well, when it was all just starting to go absolutely bonkers. And it was like, you could feel it, couldn't you? You could feel it, because like
Just tension in the air.
But I think it's the bit you've talked about, Farooq, and we've talked about this numerous times as well, where you can be outside. Like, I joke about, sometimes we're Autotrader towers, blah blah blah, but like, actually you can feel the difference when you talk about one Autotrader, when you're inside the building and inside, and then how it can be so different outside.
Yep.
So how, and I know that is definitely a hard path to navigate, because obviously life happens not just here, unfortunately.
But you know what made the biggest difference on that chat space? That the representation from people that probably weren't directly impacted turned up to listen.
Yeah.
And I remember, I won't name the person, but the person during the call messaged me straight. He goes, I literally had no idea. I can't believe that I was so ignorant to all of this. And like, I don't want anyone to apologise for that.
No.
The reason that I don't is because I think that they turned up, they showed up, they listened, and they took something away from it. And that is super, super important.
Yeah.
And it's not to make people feel bad about how they are. It's more about the sharing. And I think when this person turned up and was listening to the stories, almost like horrified, and I think the words they used was, I've been in my own little bubble for the last week and I've not realised that this has been the impact to my colleagues.
I'm going to keep on this theme, probably, because I know we were chatting beforehand. I'm going to come back to a couple of the points you raised, John, but just stick with this for a minute. So, like, that whole showing up piece, us three went to a talk a couple of weeks ago. I think it was a webinar on standing united as allies during the Black Inclusion Week, and that definitely made me think around, like, how do I show up, or how do my colleagues show up, and especially when there's tough events happen. So that point you made, so like, where someone reached out and it was a text message or a little ping. So what are the things that, like, again, probably more hints and tips for me, but like, how would you, as senior people in the network, how would you, when you think of allyship, but how do you want your colleagues to show up? Is there particular behaviours that you, like you've just talked about, Fuzz, that you appreciate or would like to see more of?
You and I have spoken about this, actually, and I'm going
to in our journeys in the car.
I'm going to pick on you, actually, because actually when I think about what I want from a colleague and a friend at Autotrader, actually I do think of you. One of those traits for me is someone that's inquisitive, sincerely and genuinely just wants to inquire and understand. And that's a huge thing, because you're reaching out, you want to bridge the gap in your knowledge. So being inquisitive. Second thing for me, and you're definitely this, is it's courageous. And what I mean by that is the ability to call out inappropriate behaviour. That's what you want from a colleague. And often people will be in meetings where they see microaggressions and all of those, and actually just generally people stay quiet, because it depends who's in there. But actually you've got those traits of you would call something out. So that's fantastic. The third thing, and this is very Pete, and you'll all know this, is someone that's reflective. We don't all get it right. We're all human beings. We make errors. We make whatever. Yeah. But it's fantastic when someone comes to you a day later, an hour later, and says, do you know what? I was in that meeting. This was said. I thought about it a bit more. Can we just have a chat about it and review whatever? How did that make someone feel? And again, you've got those traits in abundance. So for me, those are probably three things that I'd want.
Yeah. What about yourself, Fuzz?
I think similar to Farooq in terms of all of them behaviours, I think they really do matter in the small actions or they might seem like small to other people but have a big impact.
Yeah.
But for me as well, it's making sure that we are championing people in the same way.
Yeah.
Like if you see somebody from a different background doing well, like be public about the praise and like give it to them and make sure that it's quite equal, like how you would praise somebody else, you'd praise them in the same way. The other thing is like, it's very hard for people to share their vulnerabilities. Like it's hard for people to share personal experiences because you sometimes, and this is my personal experiences, you don't want to be associated with somebody who's like, you know, just there because they're ticking a box. You know, you don't want to be the poster person for anything. So you want to be there on your merit. So to share your vulnerabilities with someone, there has to be a base level of trust.
Yeah.
To get that base level of trust, people have to be willing to listen and almost not make it about them. They've got to make it about what they're taking away from the conversation.
Yeah.
And to Farooq's point, no one gets it right. You know, there's lots of emotions attached to personal experiences. So when you're articulating what you've been through, it might not always come across as like a big thing to other people, but actually for that person, they've carried it all their life, or they've carried it for an amount of time in their life. And sometimes the power of the network is when people are sharing stories, they're so similar. Like the sentiment is so similar. You find a lot of people nodding and agreeing and saying, I felt that. Yeah. That wasn't just me. That was because of this thing that's happening here.
I remember going to a talk, Fiona, who's one of like the external facilitators, and she was talking through, and you could see like a number of people in the room nodding along, and it was like that was definitely for me an eye opener, because I was like, that's shocking. And then you look around, and like 3 or 4 people are all nodding.
We've been
like,
through that.
Yeah.
And it's hard because everyone articulates that sentiment and that feeling in a different way, but when people do it, you attach yourself to that experience because you've been through the similar thing. And it's very powerful for someone to sit there and listen and build that trust. And I think that the network has enabled that in a huge way. Yeah.
And is there anything else, John, you'd add in terms of that, the showing up or behaviours?
I think ultimately, probably going back to that webinar, it's like establishing those connections and being true about those connections, that, you know, it's not about face value and ultimately, you know, a control of the narrative or control of the language. I think, connection and ultimately empathy. Because, you might not have walked in the same shoes as your fellow colleague, but ultimately, if they are there wanting to be vulnerable, to give an idea to others about what and how they've lived life, that actually you show true empathy with that is not ignored, that, you know, aspects around opportunities when there are roles that come along, that it's not about proximity bias, either people who you're just surrounded in, that actually you are thinking wider about who might be best for roles. So I think ultimately connection and empathy for me, really.
That showing up bit actually that you've mentioned, we've chatted about. A huge thing that we try and do is pay it forward.
Yeah.
So we've talked about lived experiences, which sometimes haven't been great. And we've had some great experiences at the same time. But you go, actually, how do I try and ensure that the next lot of talent that comes through, whatever their backgrounds are, whatever their diversity is, that they don't have to go through those same scenarios. So we all collectively do a whole load of coaching, mentoring, support, and sometimes it's about opening doors, but sometimes joining the dots. You know, we talk about squiggly careers at Autotrader and people move around, but sometimes they don't know how to navigate the business. How do I speak to so-and-so?
Yeah, no, I mean, like,
and facilitate some
you know,
of
we
that.
talked about some of there's like similarities and there's cross-cutting across networks. So it's definitely, when social mobility side, talk about like pay it forward.
Yeah.
Like how totally different spectrum of thinking, not thinking of like example was like, I always think about my dad who was just lucky from someone spotted him, and then that completely changed probably my life because my dad was plucked out of nowhere and then did really well. And it's the bit where you want to pay it forward, don't you? So that I can't pay it forward. I didn't have the experience, but I still feel like I owe to pay forward.
Yeah.
You always want to try and do it, don't
totally
you?
Get it.
There's a quick example that just before COVID, I remember working late one evening. I went for a coffee just at our local coffee bar, and one of our staff members were there. They worked on our support desk for security. Really lovely gentleman. Had a nice chat while getting a brew, and found out that this individual had a degree in computer science. He had a master's in computer science. Really, really bright. And I said, well, how come you're doing that role, and how come you've been doing it for like the last 2 or 3 years? He said, well, I love my job, but I didn't know that there were other opportunities available. Yeah. And I just managed to just join up a couple of dots, go and speak to so-and-so, see if you can get some work experience. And now is a fantastic DevOps engineer and did a talk at our conference this year. So it's wonderful to see sort of success stories like that. Yeah. And that's that ability to try and join up those dots and pay it forward.
Yeah. Is that like, because I know personal experiences are really personal. So like, I don't want to start putting people on the spot, like, give me an example. Because it's just,
We've got loads, Pete. We've got so many.
But it was the bit of going, is that like, so when you think about a work basis and your personal experiences, what have your personal lived experiences changed? Did they change the way you bring yourself to work?
Absolutely, mate. Look, personal experiences are deep and sometimes raw. For me, whether it's going through school, in some workplaces, or actually just out on the street.
Yeah.
You're suffering from, overt racism. It's in your face. And actually not 5 years, like 20 years ago, it happened a lot in the workplace, right? So how does that impact on you coming to work? Sort of massively. Your mindset is like, you're always kind of on tender hooks. You're probably not a risk taker. You probably don't speak up as much. So it impacts on the mindset of those that are from minority groups. One thing I've spoken about before is in that mindset, and we talk to our kids about this, don't we, Fuzz, is you've just got to be better. And it's a weird thing for other people to hear, but growing up with my 2 girls, it's like, you have to be better educated. You have to be consistent, reliable, hardworking, work ethic, second to none. And you've just got to be better. And it's kind of a bit unfair that we put our kids under that pressure. But having lived through all these experiences, you want them to succeed. Yeah. And so that's kind of that impact that it has on us in terms of mindset. I don't know whether is that the same scenario?
I think it is. And you do, like you said about how it impacts in how you show up every day. You constantly feel like you're in this cycle where you have to prove yourself, and sometimes people will say to you, but you don't need to, you've got your space, you've worked really hard, and you're like, no, I need to keep this trajectory up so that it feels like, I can show everybody. And the thing I said before about being the poster person and paying it forward, it's the balance of that. It's having the courage to pay it forward and sacrificing your own sort of, like, for me it was more around, I don't want my merit to be discounted because I'm the only brown person in the room and it looks like I'm just been placed there. I wanted it to be because people thought I was really good at what I did. And some people might say, well, that's easy, you can say you're really good at what you do, and like, no, it doesn't work like that, because your mindset, you're always trained. Personal experiences sometimes make you think you're only good enough to do the jobs that nobody else wants to do, or having the overt racism, and sometimes having the racism that probably isn't as overt, and there's probably, you do have to work twice as hard to get some opportunities. So then you try and pass that down to your kids because you feel like it's your role to make sure that you build them up for what they have to deal with. And it is unfair, but it's the only way you know how to cope.
I'm going to sound a bit controversial here.
Go for it, John.
But I wasn't really conscious of my Chinese heritage until 2018, until my firstborn. And that point about wanting to protect your child. Because it's only at that point did I really feel that he'll be disadvantaged for being part Chinese and part white. So at that point, I wanted to learn and understand what that actually meant.
Right.
Because I had a fairly fortunate upbringing in terms of I've not had that overt racism directed at myself or my immediate family, even though I grew up in, you know, a predominantly white community, and I grew up with all my friends being white, so I never had really that aspect of overt racism. But it was only when I held my child the first time, looking at him, thinking I need to protect this thing, that I started thinking consciously about what it means being of diverse nature, and then that sort of really brought it more into life when it came to the pandemic, when that sense, that feeling where people were blaming people of Asian and Chinese descent of, you know, where COVID and the pandemic came from. Queuing in the nursery to drop off my child, listening to a few of the mums to say, "Why is Ethan here? Should he be even here because he's spreading it? And shouldn't they be going back to their country now?" You know, that was the first piece of overt racism for me.
It's tremendous, isn't it?
And again, you know, that is why I want to understand more.
Yeah.
I want to understand more to protect and to, you know, to have that toolkit to give them the understanding of what it means to have the mixed heritage, to celebrate it, but also prepare them that, you know, they may not have had or may not have as a protected environment that I had when I grew up. So for me, deeply, that is my trigger in terms of why I wanted to be part of the network.
Yeah.
Just to understand more about my own heritage and culture, but actually my wider family. You know, Chinese, black, white. I wanted to understand more because, you know, the world is changing, unfortunately.
Right, I'm going to go back to the network for a sec, just because I'm conscious of time, even though honestly we could talk for hours and hours. But it's something me and Farooq were talking about, I think a couple of weeks ago, like how like there is big achievements, and we talked on a few, but like if we were going to again showcase to other businesses, what do you believe are those? And I know, Fuzz, you called out that sometimes the little things, but are there any particular hero achievements you feel like, if you look back on your time in Autotrader, being part of the network or being actively part of the network, that you go, yeah, that was really good?
For me, and it's very personal, is Ramadan Day.
Oh God! See, I did
just because of the pain that I put you through, Pete.
I'm not joking. I've still got the scars from.
Still recovering.
Yeah, that was it. That was in lockdown, wasn't it? Remote.
But next year you're doing all 30 days, yeah. But no, just to touch on that. So, like I say, I've been here for 16 years now, and I remember around sort of 14, 15 years ago, we're in Newton-le-Willows, and some of the system engineers were like, you know what, we can give this a go. And they did. And they swore at me all day. They thought they were going to die, and it was all a bit crazy. But they did a brilliant job and completed it. We went to Nawab's, the biggest buffet in Manchester, to open the fast, and all of them had like one round of starters and then went into a food coma. And then I'm ready to go home. But it's gone from that little sort of like that seed of activity, and where I was taking their dinner money and then giving it to UNICEF as charity, to every year since. And it's grown and grown across the business.
It seems to have got bigger and bigger, doesn't it?
The amount of non-Muslims that fast for the entire day, whether it's with water or nil by mouth, and the empathy, the love and the respect. And we put on dinner at night for everyone to open their fast within the business. And then the amount of people that turn up. I just think that's phenomenal. And for me, it makes me feel just joyous that every year during this very difficult test for us, so many people support us and empathise. Yeah. And like say, you're going to do 30 days with me next year, aren't you, Pete?
On record now.
I struggled. I really did
well,
struggle.
Though. You did really well.
I was like, a bit like, I was like, yeah, of course I will. And then it got to about 4:30.
I'm going to die.
And I thought I thought I was hallucinating.
What are we talking about? I did the first time this year. You know, it's like,
I agree with you, Farooq, so much, because I feel like the celebratory stuff is amazing because so many people come forward, whether it's Ramadan, whether it's Diwali, whether it's something else. Like seeing people share who they are, like is massive. And to your point, I've been here for 13 years, but I've worked for like 20 odd years.
Yeah.
Like that journey of like people being able to share is unreal. Like before, when I first started, I wouldn't even tell people that I was fasting. I would just like not even share it. And the fact that people are celebrating alongside you, that is amazing. And most recently, I think for me, the big highlight was when we did Black Heroes Week. I thought reading all of them stories, people taking the time to write, it was just amazing. Yeah. And all of these influential people of Black background, it was like amazing to read it all, people sharing it, and I felt like really humbled.
It was an education piece, wasn't it? I spent one Sunday,
I
think I wrote in the thing, I'm grabbing a Kit Kat and a coffee,
and
I'm going to sit and read through and work through in my mind who my Black heroes are.
And I couldn't choose.
There's so many, wasn't there?
So many.
Fantastic.
From that, and then doing the more stuff that's probably makes people feel a little bit uncomfortable, like the Black listening workshops, and it all feels like people are willing to be a little bit uncomfortable to learn things. So I think they are really big things that the network has achieved.
What about yourself, John? It is a little bit of a last but not least, this one.
No, I think similar to these two, I think it's establishing that safe space. I think that you can talk, and you can talk about race, and you can talk about ethnicity, you can talk about impacts. We're knowing that people will empathise. Yeah. And providing the forums around the chat spaces, the uncomfortable conversations, even just on the channel, that people are willing to share. I feel that's one of the ultimate sort of achievements that we have. And then the others are, establishing those awareness pieces that we do every year, whether that is Ramadan, whether that is Black History Month, whether that's Race Equality Week. We will never take the eye off the ball of these things, that, these things matter. These things matter because, unfortunately, in society, there are still, discriminations. There are still levels of people who don't understand and do not want to understand. But we're there to try and help and educate if we can. So I think that. And ultimately, sharing different foods. So when we can create the takeovers and Thomas Franks for all the various
Chinese New
events
Year was good this year.
Lunar New Year, exactly.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Food.
Because
Food, it's my nemesis.
Yeah.
Honestly, that was great. I'm sorry we're out of time, and I do appreciate you bringing, obviously, lived experiences and a topic that I do like to discuss, but it's obviously it is one that is lots of breadth we could go deep on. So, cheers for coming along, and thanks for those tuning in. So don't forget, if you like this podcast, to like and subscribe on YouTube, hit the notification button so you never miss another episode, and follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and hopefully you'll tune in for another episode soon. Cheers, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.